thank you for coming to talk to me today, talk with Theo. And you are John Paul Dineen III. That's a lot to say. And your wife, Heather Dineen. And how long have y'all been married?
21 years, right?
Wow. Yeah, you got to ask yourself.
That's how I was quiet to let him say, see if he knows.
Exactly. Good. Well, tell me a little bit about the Dineens. Tell me, what do you do here in Waxahachie?
So we're full-time farmers, been farming here 30 years, first generation farmers. Went to school here, raised here in the community of Oz. Knew Heather in high school, knew of Heather in high school. And
So y'all went to high school together?
we did.
In Waxahachie?
Yes. And her brother worked for me when we was in high school, and met up in church, taking up the offering. I was an usher, and she happened to be visiting that day and passing the plate, and was, oh wow, look at that little girl in the Sunday dress.
How many years apart are y'all? What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 91.
I graduated in 92.
Okay. So you were 1 year ahead of him, so you were a little bit smarter.
Yeah. That's why I say knew of her. So
Right.
upperclassman kind of a thing, you didn't talk to them.
Right. So you two have something going here in Waxahachie. It's called the Yellow Farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your house? Tell me about the Yellow Farmhouse.
Well, farmers are very efficient, so the name is very simple.
Okay.
We truly live in a yellow farmhouse. We don't sell any of our goods at the farm. We operate out of the Waxahachie Farmers Market.
Okay.
But we sell our local meat, so beef, pork, sometimes we have chicken. This year we don't, but with all the COVID stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We sell the individual meat cuts. So.
And about 6 years ago, the volatility of markets and the upswings, downswing, it's hard to make a living, and you sell when just about the time you are ready to sell those calves, usually the market falls out of bed for whatever reason. Seems to happen that way.
Yeah.
And you look forward to selling them because the market's usually high at that time. But anyways, as you probably remember your folks talking about, they're bringing a good price, and then when you get there, they didn't bring a good price.
I felt like I just stepped back into time hearing you, because I hear Daddy in my head right now, cattle prices went down.
Right.
And can't believe it.
Yeah, I always, somebody caught a cold somewhere and decided to, change the market or whatever.
Right.
And so, we're trying to help our family and trying to have a little more consistent income. And so we started, instead of selling the steers just at a commercial market, we started taking them to a USDA processor. We invested in a freezer and that kind of stuff. And we bring all the cuts back home, and then we market those directly to the consumers.
Well, I was wondering how that got started, because you probably were selling off the actual cattle, but then you decided just to sell off the meat. So
Correct.
Do people go to the Yellow Farmhouse to buy it?
They don't come to the house or to the farm. We just meet them at the Waxahachie Farmers Market. Even when the market's not in season, we still do our pickups there.
Okay.
Because every year we get new customers that didn't even know we had a farmers market. So that way it lets us help spread the word as to where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. And do you have the meats and fruit? Fruit?
We don't have any fruits and vegetables, but we do the meats. The beef is off our place. We have a friend that raises the pork for us, and so we have pork cuts and bacon and breakfast sausage and that kind of stuff.
We started with our own pork, but one of these awful storms blew the roof off the barn, so we don't have any pigs at the farm right now. So that's why we have some other full-time farmers that we contract through from time to time for that kind of stuff.
So literally when pigs fly.
Yes.
There you go.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and so people come to the farmer's market and they get to buy, have they already pre-ordered it, or?
We offer it both ways. So you can buy online, and we'll have it already bagged up with your name on it. You can just walk up to our booth and say, "Hey, I'm here, and my name is, Brenda," or whatever. We'll go to the truck and get it and bring it right to them. Or whatever we've got available at the time, we have there at the market. So you can walk up, and we have a board that has all of our cuts listed that are available, and you can put together your own package stuff.
Wow. How long have y'all been doing that at the farmer's market?
So I've actually been at the farmer's market probably 6 years. I started with grains. We milled the wheat, the corn, and the milo that we raised into whole grain flour. I made whole grain baking mixes. That's really labor intensive.
Yes, I was just about to say, how do you do that?
Well, we have grist mills. We have a commercial kitchen at the farm, and we have some stone grist mills that we do all the milling through. But our kids are a big part of our labor force, and they kind of revolted. They don't like it as much. So with COVID and everything, and a couple of years ago, we had a really bad just drought in the crop. We just didn't like the quality of the grains, so we kind of put that on hold for a little bit and only are doing the meats. But we started doing the meats probably 4 or 5 years ago, something like that.
And you talk about your kids revolting. Were your parents farmers?
No.
Okay.
No, my grandfather ran a crane in the steel mill. My other grandfather was a postal worker. My mom was a teller in the local banks here in Waxahachie.
So you've self-taught almost yourself to be a farmer.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Had lots of help from folks through the years and trial and error.
Oh yeah, a lot of that. But I was one of those kids that revolted. Summer would be 110, and on the sand it was even worse. And Daddy'd be like, "We got to go pick watermelons and cantaloupes," and I'm like, "Oh, for your school clothes." Anyway, that was hard. So when I grew up, got married, and left the farm, I was like, "Woo, not gonna have to go back to do that." It is very hard. But hearing that you kind of taught yourself in a way and had help from people to get it done, that's amazing. Well, so when y'all first got married 22, 21 years ago, what were you doing then? Were you farming already? So you were farming like in high school?
So I started baling hay in high school.
Okay.
And then when I graduated high school, I had my first row crop. It was a crop of milo and stuff. And so I've been farming always and doing custom hire work, so baling hay for folks and things like that.
Oh wow!
Baling hay is where I started.
He started at age 11 mowing yards, and had a very successful. I'm gonna brag on him for a minute. He had a very successful lawn company here from at the age of 11 until he did the hay and transitioned over to farming.
Well, hay's just a much bigger lawnmower.
That's right.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
That's right.
So you're mowing grass, baling hay, and then you decided to buy some cows, or?
Well, truth be told, I had that. I had a wood yard in town, sold firewood, sold Christmas trees at Christmas time, that kind of stuff. And then, started into the hay. And then in those days, when you rented land, there would generally be a little bit of a pasture that went with it that they had fenced off, years ago. And so that's kind of where the cows started in, because you had a block of cultivated land, but then you had, a portion of it that was in grass, so you put some cows on there and stuff.
Okay. So you got married, you turned your lawnmower business into the hay baling business, and then tell me what happened. Y'all decided to start a family?
Yeah, we I guess right away started having kiddos, and
3 of them back to back, nearly.
Yes, 2 years apart. Everybody was 18 months to 2 years apart.
Wow. So in 2019, my mother was killed on the farm, and my husband had went to school with you, and he remembered a similar story, and he reached out to you, and you had told us about the Texas Agricultural Memorial in Austin. So tell me more, what is the Texas Agricultural Memorial?
So that is a day that the governor has set aside that we recognize those in agriculture that have either been killed in an ag accident, severely injured and survived, or they dedicated their life to agriculture. So we have 3 categories there. And kind of how that came about or started. So early in 2016, I had woke up one morning and maybe we hear things on the radio or we see little clips of things or whatever, and that triggers a little thought. Well, I had woken up and I told Heather, I said, man, I had this weird dream, that we were in Austin at this ceremony, at this memorial ceremony. And I said, have you heard anything about that or seen that? Where did get this? And he said, no, I don't think so. Well, maybe you saw a commercial or heard a radio ad or something, She goes, why don't you just kind of start Googling it and see, and she goes, see what you come up with. So I did, and, there wasn't anything. And I said, there's nothing, out there. And she goes, well, where? I said, I don't know. I said, I just pictured, this ceremony in the Capitol. And she goes, well, why don't you, call some folks and ask around. So I had started reaching out to a couple of folks that I knew in Austin and in different, parts of agriculture across the state. And they were like, no, don't know anything about that or anything. So come to find out, there at the time, there was no ag memorial. There was no list or ceremony or anything like that to recognize those in agriculture that had suffered that kind of a loss. Okay.
Wow. So you contacted the commissioner, or how did you eventually get it going?
So that was one of those kind of blessings deals. You may have heard the scenario of you're asked to carry the ball, and you can either carry the ball or you can pass it to somebody else.
Right.
I think that was one of those things that God at the time was asking me to carry that ball. Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about legal procedures to set things up, in the Capitol and the government and all that kind of stuff. But I was willing to carry that ball, and so God blessed a lot of doors to open because I didn't know. I started reaching out to some legislators. I reached out to folks in the TDA. I was able to make some connections in the governor's office, and that's kind of where it started. It was through the governor's office of how to go about setting things up to have that day, and things in the Capitol. You have to meet with the Capitol Committee to get permission to use the rooms. Then you have to have legislative sponsors to sponsor the use of those rooms. And
so you can't just say, hey, next Thursday we want to have a big It was so impressive. There were the people on the horse, mm-hmm. and the wreath and the lunch, and it was very impressive. I knew that my mom's work needed to be honored. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I appreciate you.
Well, you're very welcome.
Giving us that, because it was, it was pretty quick for us because Mama just passed in July and that was in November. But I just, from very early on, I just felt like she needed that honor. She worked her butt off on that farm as a farmer's wife and a preacher's wife, and
right.
Thank you for.
You're very welcome. And that's what our goal is, and that's what our intention was all across the state, whether it's on a ranch, a farm, forestry industry, whatever part of agriculture you're in, the rice, the fish, down on the coast.
And teachers,
yes,
ag teachers.
It
was like, wow, right. It was so great that they
worked so hard, for that. And a lot of times, those folks, they work hard, they give of themselves. And, to be honest, sometimes it's a thankless thing. People, sometimes they're looking at the food, whether it's at a farmer's market, a grocery store, whatever. It still came from a farm and a ranch, but they're looking at that and they're more critical of the price or something like that, and not the life cost that came behind it sometimes, because right. A lot of times there can be more than an economic cost to raising that stuff. And that's what we wanted to give the opportunity for the state of Texas to say thank you back to those families and stuff like that. And sometimes, it gives them that sense of closure for some of those families that have lost someone in a instantaneous accident kind of a thing.
Right.
In there.
So going back to that, there are a lot of losses that are tragic, mm-hmm. and y'all have experienced one. And do you think that is what made this dream or this vision come into your mind?
I think it did, so it was about 10 years earlier that our loss had occurred, and there wasn't really any significance to me waking up that day. It wasn't like it was his birthday or the day of the accident. So I don't know the timing wise, other than it took a long time to kind of get it, in process, and we were able to get it going that fall of that year.
Wow! So it started 2016.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It was in the spring, and the first ceremony was held November 21st, 2016.
Okay. Now, do you want to talk about the loss of your child?
We can.
It
was 2006, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We were in a drought that year, which meant that we were searching out places to bale hay. When you have a drought type year, okay, so then we're grain farmers. That means you're not really going to make a grain crop. So you're trying to find other ways for revenue to pay the bills, that kind of stuff.
Right. So you're just looking for another job.
Yeah. Looking for other revenue streams. Of course, we have to have our own stockpile of hay to feed the cows through, but whatever hay you can bale up, otherwise you can sell for some cash to come in. And so we had gotten some rains late in the fall that year, so we were baling hay later than normal, and we hadn't had a frost yet, so we were baling all up through November and the Thanksgiving time in there, just trying to scratch together what we could finish up. And so we were headed out to a field that was out of town that we had gathered up to do. We had already laid the hay down and started raking it, and we're headed down to start baling. And so Johnny was had been going with me a lot that was particular year.
Your son, your first son, your first child.
Yes.
He's our second child.
Second child, okay. And
he was John Paul Dineen the fourth.
Okay.
A lot of times we called him Johnny.
Okay.
On there, and so he had gone with me that particular season, and harvested the different crops and different things like that.
How old was he when he started going with you?
Oh,
well, I mean, time they could walk, they would come and do. And
or if I needed to do something, he would take them with him. Just kind of,
right.
Babysit /
right.
learn type help build.
Yeah. So.
And so he had started coming around with me and stuff.
And he loved the farming. That you could just tell by looking at him. That's what he was going to be.
It was in his DNA.
It was, yeah, and he loved it.
Yeah, because he would, I'm sure as you remember growing up, your dad would probably stop and talk to neighbors or whatever, and you'd probably sit over there and, oh my word.
Yes.
What are they talking about? The weather and
always the weather and the rain and the drought, and have a prayer service for rain or.
And, so like I say, I do some custom work and stuff, and in that you have to stop and talk to the other farmers in the area that you might be working for and coordinate. Hey, how's your Milo coming off? When do you think it's going to be ready to cut? So that I can plan to be there when he needs me. Well, Johnny was intrigued with all that, so he would just sit and some of the guys would be like, how do you get him to sit there while we talk and just not interrupt and do? But he was just interested in it. But he would sit and let me talk and carry on whatever I needed to do. And,
wow.
And so we had gone to bale hay that day on there. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just kind of normal stuff. And so we had gotten down there and we had started baling and doing some raking and different stuff. Had help down there. We had some hands, and like I say, it was a new place. So the landlords had come down to kind of see, how the operations were going and all that kind of good stuff. And so we had kind of had a little meeting up at the barns, and Johnny had decided, he said, I want to go over here and play in the sand pile or whatever.
And how old was he?
So he
had just turned 5.
He had just turned 5. It was his day before was his birthday. And so he was there talking with the guys, and I went and started, bailing. And anyhow, so he was run over by a truck there in the barnyard while I was baling hay in the field. And so, anyways, it was they tried to get care flight or what have you and that kind of stuff, but wasn't able to get an ambulance. Finally came down, but he passed there in the field.
I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you.
People say sorry, and there's no words. So after you realized that he had gone on to heaven,
mm-hmm.
what was the next thing that happened? How did you tell her?
Well, that's some of that I talk about, of what folks don't understand in agriculture, of that other expense, or that other
cost.
The other cost that you don't, so I had to make that phone call back home. Mm-hmm. And cell service was bad and everything. I had to climb up on something to get a good enough signal to get back with her and tell her what was going on. And I actually had to make 2 phone calls. The first one was to let her know that he was hurt, and we were trying to get an ambulance mm-hmm. to find the field down there. And then, I don't remember how long after that was the second one, because she was waiting to hear what hospital are they going to take him to. Right. And so she was waiting at home to, find out. And then, of course, the second call, is I have to tell her that we lost him. Mm-hmm. So those are unbelievable calls that you never want to have to make. In your wildest dreams, you never, think you're going to be calling your wife, telling her that, mm-hmm. Especially, in agriculture. I think of other jobs, you can't think of any other job that, you would have your son, or daughter with you that, right. You would have to call your, spouse back, with that kind of news.
How did you manage those few days and weeks after?
Agriculture is different than any other occupation, industry, whatever you want to call it. And so, several things happened in the hours, days, weeks afterwards. We were in the middle of baling hay. That was income, for us. And hay is like baking a cake. It has a start time and an end time. And just like a cake, if you don't take it out of the oven at the right time, you lose it. It's not any good. Well, hay's the same way. You have an optimal time to get it baled up, or the protein value goes away, which means it's not worth anything. The sellable value goes away. And, just the community, the folks that the next day there were dozens of trucks, of semis, of tractors that came down there, and this was all before social media and video mm-hmm. cameras, but we have a few pictures of all the trucks and all the equipment that came to finish doing that hay, and then put it up in the barn, because we were doing small square bales, which is all manual labor. And the folks that came and fed the cows, and it takes days before you want to get out and do anything. Well, those cows, it's coming into wintertime and stuff, and they have to be tended to. They have to be fed and watered and different things. They all just took care of that. Whenever we started to try and go out and check on our fields and stuff like that, they would be plowed. They would be ready to go for the next year. Those are all things that, that don't stop, even though you're in that grieving process and your world stops. Unfortunately, in agriculture, things still have to go on, and that's where the community just came out and took care of things for us all through that fall, all through that season.
So the community was showing their love and their sympathy by doing all those things for your farm. You could kind of grieve together. Mm-hmm. And then how old was your other child?
So Lila was 5. No, Lila was 7. Johnny was 5, and then Amelia was just 2.
So tell me your take on that day.
So I feel like as much as the community helped, I think that was a provision God gave us. But I really think God held me that day the whole time, because he had already left for the day. And Johnny woke up later and asked if he could go with John Paul. So I said, well, I'll call Dad and see. And Johnny was the first of the kids to wake up. And so he hadn't left town. He was still in the area doing some other stuff. So he said, I'll come back and get him. So I said, okay. So I told Johnny to get ready, and I fixed him a thermos, and fixed his snacks and everything, and had him ready to go off. And so when John Paul was ready, he came back by and got him. John Paul had pulled over into the barnyard, and so he was doing some stuff over there. I think you were hooking up to a trailer or something, I don't even know. And so Johnny went out the back door and was going over to the truck. Well, the whole way to the truck, he walked backwards. And he waved at me the whole way and told me he loved me. Just, little kid.
Yeah.
And I stood there at the back door, and I thought, I need to go get my camera and take a picture of that. And I was like, no, I don't have time. I'm just going to stand here and soak that up. And
you feel like that was your gift God was giving you.
And after, when John Paul called, I was trying to get ready to go to the hospital. And I was also trying to get somebody to come to the house to stay with the girls, because I wasn't going to take them. And so we were trying to gather up family. And then when I got the call that Johnny, well, actually in the meantime, our pastor came and some other friends came.
Okay, good.
And so Brother David actually was there when it was time to, after I had heard. And so before, Brother David was going to take me to the field because I didn't know where it was. He and the wife of one of the other guys that was with John Paul there. And before I left, I stopped and I told our girls about it, because I didn't want them to hear from anybody else just talking. I wanted it to come from one of us. My grandmother was a pastor's wife. Okay. And she had been, she actually, we call broke up housekeeping, and moved from where she was after my grandfather passed here, because she wanted to help me raise the kids and be close to them. Mm-hmm. And so she was there with them, and I knew that she could answer. They were all very close, and I knew that she could answer questions, and they were in good hands. And so we got in the car, and we were driving. My pastor was driving, and I wasn't talking a whole lot, and I think he probably thought I was going into shock or something.
Right.
And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, or maybe he said, "What are you thinking?" I don't even remember. And I said, and this was the only thing that was in my mind. I mean, there was literally no other thought there. But the thought was, God is good. And I said that. I said, God is good. And he said, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And I said, I told him the story of Johnny. And I said, God knew I needed that today.
You're a pretty strong lady. You've probably been told that before by this man.
I don't know that I'm strong. I just know that I've got a good God. And I know that He covered me. And He picked me up. And
carried you through that.
Yeah. And He filled my mind with the right things. And as we were driving, I told my pastor, I said, I need you to help me. Help John Paul know it's not his fault.
Yeah.
And because I think that was one of the things that John Paul was really worried about.
Mm-hmm.
That was before we had even talked, and I think that that's how we got through this as a couple.
You know, you talk about those unique gifts that are kind of unexpected. You don't realize maybe the significance that they're going to have at the time, like Heather was sharing about the walking to the pickup carrying his jug. So that summer, he had been going with me, and I'd give him a little money for doing different things over there. Well, that spring, so we would go to the John Deere house to get parts and stuff. And so he had seen on the counter in a little book where they were coming out with a little remote control tractor. And he was like, I want to get, a little tractor. And he had seen some of those in different stores and, around town where you could pick them up there. But he made a point. He said, well, I want to order mine from the John Deere house just like you get your parts there. He didn't want to go and get it. And so I said, okay. So several weeks before, he had went up to the counter and ordered the tractor, like a big kid kind of a thing, or like an adult, And so,
like his daddy.
Yeah, because he made a point. He wanted to get it there. So they had called, and it had come in. And so he was all excited the day before. We made a trip to the John Deere house, and he had his money in his billfold to pay for it. And so I kind of stood back and let him, go. And so he went up to the counter and talked to the guy and told him that, his tractor was supposed to be here. And he paid out his money, and he got to sign the ticket. And I don't remember if you came. Somebody
The whole family came.
stood back and got some pictures of it.
John Paul, this was another gift. We didn't have a good camera. And somebody on the flea market,
KBEC.
Yes, they were getting a digital camera, and so they were getting rid of their really nice film camera. So John Paul
very
surprised
inexpensive.
me.
It was,
Yeah.
I remember hearing it and thinking,
it was,
well, I can afford that.
Yeah,
Right.
It was somebody in Ennis, and I don't have a clue who it was, but I'm forever grateful because he went and surprised me with it. And so from that point till the fall, it was earlier that summer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was able to get these wonderful pictures of the kids all together, and so I had it with me. I knew, and so I took pictures of him sitting on the stool,
Ordering his tractor.
Yes, and paying for
his
it.
tractor.
Yeah,
And so he signed the little ticket, and we've still got the ticket and everything.
it's all
And-
framed.
And
together.
the dealership actually framed it and had it there at the parts counter and everything afterwards. But that was kind of my, maybe my gift or takeaway thereafter was that,
Because you'll always have that precious memory.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. With my dad and my mom's accident, we worried the same thing, and we just kept, my husband said the best thing. He said, it's just as if you'd have gotten hit in a car, you were in a car driving and gotten hit on her side. That's the same thing that happened. It was an accident. It was an accident. But at the time, and in your grief being complicated, it's not normal grief. You don't expect to ever have your child go before you.
Right.
You don't expect that your parents here one second and gone the next. Anybody going through that immediate tragic loss where they had them for a second and the next second they're gone, that just shows you how fragile life is. But did you go to counseling after that?
We, our church actually offered Grief Share, a program.
Yes, I've heard
that
of that.
next, well, I guess during the winter, really, winter into spring. I think there was, but it was held at our church, and there was a counselor. Anyway, she facilitated the course, and so we went through it, and a couple of our family members went through it, and that really, I think, was probably besides where God took our hearts in the beginning, that was probably the next biggest thing that helped us, because John Paul being there and seeing our son and experiencing that firsthand, and those are images he can never let go of.
Yeah.
He'll never unsee those things. They protected me and did not allow me to see our son until after he admitted to funeral home and stuff. But as a mom, I'm like, I need to know every scratch, boo-boo, whatever. I needed to know those things. And so going through Grief Share, I learned that because of what he experienced, he did not want to talk about the details. Whereas as a mother, I wanted to know everything that had happened to him. I kind of wanted some of that. So we learned how to respect the different path of grief that we were taking. And we lost the same person, but he was my son, and my view of my son was different than John Paul's and his view of Johnny. And so we learned to respect that too, and how to navigate that. And that's some of the biggest things, I think, with couples, is learning how to navigate and respect that while we're grieving the same person, our grief is not the same.
That's right.
And we have to be able to respect each other and respect each other's grief.
That's exactly, and in the book that I'm writing, and why I'm even talking to y'all, is because my grief is not like yours, and I don't want you to think that your grief, our griefs are not the same. They're so different, and how you grieve is totally different. But it is just so wonderful that y'all have made it through this, because there's a lot. I was doing some research. There's a lot of married people and couples that do not stay together after the death of a child. They do not. And I feel like God really has had his hands around both of y'all. So when you went to the counselor, did they ever say what you have is complicated grief? Did they ever say it was complicated or complex?
I don't know if they used the term complicated, but we did talk about the complexity of grief, and it's just a giant, you have all these emotions, and it's a giant, like a noodle mess.
It is.
Like this giant wad of, I don't know, yarn
yuck.
Or something.
Wad of yuck, yeah. It is. I wrote a column last year about how it's just, I picture it as a bucket of black paint being poured over your head, and you have to let it dry slowly and chip it off. You can't wipe it away. It's black paint, but if you'll slow down and breathe and get help and take the love of others when they want to give it, and then just chip it off a little bit at a time, then you can see again. And I like to think that we've integrated our grief. You've got the Texas Agricultural Memorial, which would not be here. It would not be here had it not been for that. Do you think you'd have ever thought to do that had it not been for?
I don't think so.
I think it gives us a different perspective, to where those thoughts come to mind of others, if you haven't been through that. Not that you don't care about others that had it, but it gives you a different perspective.
And it's almost like that day at the Capitol, like there was just I don't want to say white elephant, but there was an understanding with everybody there. You could just look at them. You didn't have to say anything. You just look at them and you're feeling what I'm feeling in a form, in some form or another. So you integrated that grief. I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but you've integrated your grief to help others. And I like to think that we want to make them proud. I think all the time that Mama's looking down, I don't want her to be like embarrassed, like, God, I'm sorry, that's my daughter, she's mad at you, because I was for a time, but I want her to be like, God, that's my daughter, make her proud, and I know I'm going to make your son proud, and his name lives on, not just in his daddy, but in the Agricultural Memorial. He would be, how old would John Paul be now?
He'd be 19.
He'd be 19. And so you've had the Agricultural Memorial for 3 years, 4 years? Oh no,
This will be our 6th year.
6 years. And so he would have been 19 this year.
Right.
So he would have graduated Waxahachie High School, because you just had a daughter graduate.
Right, Amelia graduated this year, and he would have graduated last year. It was tough going, and you wouldn't have, you wouldn't think that a graduation, that he hasn't been in school since he was in pre-K, so you wouldn't think that would necessarily be that hard. It's not like he was in contact, or we were still in contact with a lot of those families or classmates. I mean, we do and still knew some of them, but
there were a few last year, through the magic of Facebook nowadays. There wasn't at that time, that every once in a while there would be, somebody would send us a little picture when they were doing their senior before and after, their kindergarten pictures versus their senior. He would be in the background, here or there at different.
That had to be hard, but almost you're glad they're remembering.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want them to be forgotten, and that's something I struggle with. You don't want that person to be forgotten, so when you do get that.
And I think that's a big part of the memorial as well for other families. After we attended Grief Share, then it was several years later, our church wanted to offer that again. And so we actually facilitated that class at that time for our church. We did that for a couple of years, and then John Paul actually got a new position to a board that he was elected to, and so it caused us to travel more, and we had to step out of it. But people want to know that their loved one's not forgotten. They want to know that their loved one mattered. And I think through the memorial, not only are we able to make sure that those loved ones' names, they're remembered, they're called out, they're written down, and they're acknowledged. That, and the family is acknowledged. Hey, we understand. Maybe we don't understand everything that you're going through, but we understand that this is difficult, and we understand that you're continuing on, and we thank you for that. And I think it's really important. Consumers are so out of touch, like he said before, with where the food comes from, what it takes to get it to the store, what it takes to get it to the table. And I think it's really, really important that as a state, as an industry, as individuals, we can go back and say, I appreciate you. I appreciate what this cost you, particularly. Yeah. And not only are we able to say those things to the families, we are partnering with the Southwest Center for Ag Safety. Mm-hmm. Had to make sure I said that right.
Okay.
And once the funds are raised, we have a tentative approval to put a memorial kiosk in the Ag Museum that is located in the state capitol. And so those names will be there. It'll be an interactive kiosk where you can actually make nominations to the memorial, but you can also look up and read about safety education. And it'll be a way to educate the public as well as to the different safety concerns and hazards that are in the ag industry. Agriculture is one of the most dangerous industries there is. And it's one of the, it's the only one, like you mentioned before, that involves the entire family a lot of the time. And so there is a lot of education that we want to be able to put out there. Yeah, pass on.
Where would somebody go to find out about that? Where could they go right now so they can keep up with that?
Right now, I guess probably our Facebook page, the Memorial Foundation's Facebook page. We are just finishing up everything for the foundation 501c3. So then we have several families and individuals that have pledged donations to help put that kiosk
I'm glad I'm knowing about this because I will be a family that's going to help with that. Absolutely. I didn't even.
The goal is that they can go through there and read a bio on each of the honorees from the memorial, in the years past.
I love that.
Yeah, so the families, so you will be able to submit that information for your mom, and then others, when they visit the museum, will be able to look at that and read about her.
I love that idea because then they're not forgotten. Because what I'm learning through doing this video cast about complicated grief is that people just want to know, number one, that their loved one's not forgotten, and number two, that they're not alone. Yeah. That they're not alone in that grief that's different than others. So, on a lighter note, let's try to wipe the tears off you. On a lighter note, you were with Mr. Matthew McConaughey recently. What happened with that?
So, we, like in Texas, we have epic things happen here. We had, a once in 100-year storm, Winter Storm Uri came through, and it was one of those perfect storms that, I think the folks like to use, where you had the electric grid shut down. We were below zero for days on end.
I can't imagine
and froze in and
on
everything
a farm
like that. So, Mr. McConaughey, like all great Texas folks, he put together a benefit for the state of Texas for those that had things that happened that were not covered under insurance in there. It was a really amazing event. He had George Strait, had all kind of different singers and artists and things like that participate.
That is great. I was going through my Facebook and I saw that. I was like, oh my goodness, John Paul's with Matthew McConaughey, getting to the big time. All right.
There you go.
Well, thank y'all for coming, and I know that what you've said today has helped some people out there, and maybe it's even done a little bit more of maybe a little healing on that closure and grief with you too, maybe. But thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking us. We appreciate it.